Welcome to the Lida Citroen podcast, your space to grow your influence and elevate your personal brand. In each episode, you'll hear inspiring stories, expert insights, and practical strategies to help you stand out, lift up others, and leave your mark on your team, your community, or the world. If you're ready to make your voice heard, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Hello, friends. I'm so excited to see you. I feel like every time I come back to do one of these podcasts, whether I have a guest, whether I'm doing it by myself, I get so excited because I feel like you're all here with me. And it's like coming together with a bunch of friends that maybe I haven't seen in a while, or at least haven't seen in a couple weeks. So I'm so glad you're here. If this is the first time you've listened to the Lida Citroen podcast, I really hope you enjoy it. Welcome. If you've been part of this podcast and you've listened to the content, I think you're going to really enjoy today's message. And I'm really glad you came back. Don't forget to follow, like, drop a comment. I read every comment that comes through on any platform, doesn't matter. I read them, and your input and feedback is so important to me. Today, we're going to talk about something a little different, so buckle up because this might strike home for several of you. What if I told you that the behavior you think is making people like you is actually the exact thing that is preventing them from respecting you, considering you for a new opportunity, and building your influence? What if it's that same thing? Because people pleasing rarely feels like a problem when you're doing it, right? People pleasing feels like kindness, like you're being a good teammate, a supportive colleague, an accessible leader. That's exactly why it is so hard to catch and so expensive by the time you do. I remember a few years ago, a client asked me to take on a project that was well outside of the scope of what we had contracted to do. And it was a favor, really, but they just dressed it up and disguised it as a request. And I thought about it for a half a second because I had no bandwidth to do this. Every instinct of mine said, no, not this time. But I pictured their face if I said no. The look on their face of them thinking I wasn't a team player. And I said yes before I'd even finished my thought. I spent the next 3 weekends on work I would never bill for, resentful the entire time. Not resenting them, resenting myself for a yes I never actually chose. And here's the part that stung later. They didn't respect me more for it. If anything, I had just taught them my no wasn't a real option. And that's the moment I started paying attention to how often I was doing this. That's people pleasing. Every yes that should have been a no dilutes your brand. Every suppressed opinion makes your brand less distinct. The cumulative effect isn't warmth, it's a reputation that's likable, but not influential. And that doesn't build the career, the legacy, or the impact you're capable of. If you are leading, whether it's a team or a client, a project, life, and you're chronically saying yes when you want to or should say no, you aren't building influence, you're eroding it. Today, we're going to unpack what people pleasing actually is and isn't, and why it quietly diminishes your influence, and the filters you can run every future yes or no through starting now. So, what is people pleasing and what isn't it? Well, here's the first thing worth knowing. Most people pleasers don't identify themselves as people pleasers. They identify as generous, collaborative, helpful, and kind. And that's what makes this hard to self-diagnose. The behavior and the identity feel like the same thing, right? They feel synonymous. But people pleasing is fundamentally a personal branding problem. When you build your personal identity and your professional identity around agreeing with others, you aren't building an authentic, strong personal brand. You're building a moving target. People pleasing breaks that promise continuously because the promise keeps shifting based on who's in the room and what they want from you, right? So, how do you tell the difference between the real thing and people pleasing? That's really tricky. And you have to figure out where the behavior originates. So, that starts with you. So, say that the behavior comes from generosity, which is giving from a place of gratitude versus complying from fear, right? I do it because I am grateful. I do it because I want to serve. I struggled at the beginning of my work with the military because I really believed that I was doing it for the reasons I professed, right? I was doing it because I'm grateful for the men and women who've served our nation. And there were times where that little bit of, am I doing it because of an obligation? Have I started a rock rolling downhill that I can't stop? And now I have to. And I have checked myself many times. And I'm grateful for the fact that I keep coming back to, no, I do this because I am so grateful for the men and women who've served. What I do in giving up a weekend or giving up an afternoon or not charging to speak at an event or taking a call from a veteran when I'd rather be spending time with my family, I do it because of that gratitude. There is no question in my mind. There is today not even a doubt in my mind that I feel some kind of obligation and I'm pushing forward because I want someone to like me or I want to build my name in a certain market. That is so clear to me. And it should be clear to you if you're using gratitude, generosity as the lead, right? If that's what's prompting you. What about collaboration? Are you making space for other people's ideas or are you suppressing your own so that no one kind of figures out you don't know what you're comfortable advocating for or so no one else is uncomfortable, right? When we collaborate because of motives that aren't the genesis of collaboration, that's not true collaboration. And then it does become people pleasing. So we've got to check ourselves on that one. And the last one is kindness. Are you caring about someone's well being or are you doing something to manage their opinion of you? And I think that's the one that probably catches most of us, right? Am I doing it to be kind, to be a loving person because I'm trying to be Christ like, or I'm trying to lean into my brand of being inclusive and welcoming? If the motivation is because I want them to like me more, so I'm going to compromise my time, my boundaries, my priorities to gain favor, that's when the motivation is people pleasing and not kindness. And, here's the thing, people pleasing doesn't just start with behavior, it starts with the story you're telling yourself about the behavior. So, hopefully, you had a chance to listen to episode 25, where I did an episode talking about self talk. And I heard from many of you. Several of you actually reached out to me on text or on email and said, wow, was that a message I needed to hear? What we focused on in that episode was the idea that what you tell yourself shapes how you show up for other people. The internal tape of the people pleaser will say things like, if I say no, they won't like me. My value to the team comes from being needed. If I disagree or I say no, I'll damage the relationship. Or it's easier to just say yes. It just keeps the peace. Well, those kinds of tapes run before every yes that should have been a no. That's where we have to catch ourselves. And people pleasing and imposter syndrome, which is another popular episode we did back on episode 21, often live in the same house. When you don't fully believe that you belong in the room, in the role, having a seat at the table, you compensate by being agreeable. You make yourself easy to work with as a substitute for trusting that you're valuable to work with. There's a big difference there. So ask yourself what the last time you said yes and immediately felt that quiet resentment that you couldn't explain, what was driving that? Was it a true sense of generosity and gratitude? Was it compliance? Was it trying to gain favor? What was the root of it? Because we can't fix it if we don't know where it starts. If you love AI as much as I do, then you know that artificial intelligence can automate tasks, but it can't replace human influence, emotional intelligence, or credibility. That's why I created a new program titled The Human Advantage: Elevating Executive Presence and Influence in the Age of AI. This program bridges technology and humanity and focuses on the human skills leaders need most today: leadership presence, ethical and strategic AI use, emotional intelligence, communications, and strategic agility. Designed for in-person, hybrid, and remote workplaces, this program equips professionals to lead with confidence, credibility, and clarity. Because in the age of AI, human influence is the ultimate advantage. To explore how I work with organizations on topics like this, or on executive presence, personal branding, influence, and leadership communications, and to book a speaking engagement with me, visit me at lida360.com/speaking or click the link in the show notes. And people pleasing quietly diminishes your influence. That's where the real cost lives. And most people pleasers never see it coming. The reputation that forms around people pleasing is not things like, oh, she's so kind or he's so easy to work with. Over time, it becomes something else entirely. She's agreeable, but I'm not sure she has conviction, or he never pushes back. I don't know if I can trust his real opinion. I like working with them, but I wouldn't put them up for a leadership role. They won't make the hard decisions, the hard calls. So ask yourself, are there people in your professional world who would describe you as agreeable before they would describe you as decisive? Is there a relationship, a boss, a client, a colleague, where you consistently shrink your own perspective to preserve their comfort? Have those hard conversations with yourself. It's okay if you see something you're not proud of. It's okay if you see something that you regret, because you can change it. But if you don't see it, if you don't know where it comes from, it's really hard to change that. And then there's this people pleasing paradox. I want to talk about that for a moment. Think about the leaders who have had the most impact on you. Were they the ones who always agreed with you, who never challenged you, who made you feel comfortable always? Or were they the ones who told you something when it was hard to say, who held a standard, who had a clear point of view that you could learn from? Influence comes from being trustworthy, and trust requires knowing what someone's value is, what they value, and where they actually stand on something. And this is the paradox. When leaders people please, they don't just limit their own influence, they limit the growth of everyone around them. Teams that aren't given honest feedback don't develop or take risks or innovate. Clients that aren't challenged don't reach their potential. Organizations led by people who won't make unpopular decisions stall out. The kindest thing you can do is often the thing that risks someone's momentary discomfort. I get that, right? I've heard it argued that women do this more than men, or people of certain industries do this more. I'm not gonna adjudicate that right now, right? I mean, let's just face it, most of us do this a lot. So what are the things you can do to fix it? If you've identified you're a people pleaser, you see that it's not working, your reputation or perhaps your influence is in jeopardy, what can you do? Well, the first thing I would advocate is to set boundaries. And as I said that, as I said boundaries, those hard lines in the sand, did that scare you? Could you come across too strict or unyielding if you have boundaries? These are real concerns, but they don't have to limit the value of your time. Boundaries actually free us. Think about that. Boundaries free us. They ensure we can play all the way to the fence and spread ourselves wide and grow and innovate confidently because we know how to prioritize and guide our time and our career. So there was a study done many years ago, and I still have yet to find the source of the study. So if you know it, please drop me a note in the comments because I can't find the source. But the study looked at a playground, and it was a playground of a brand new school. And what they saw was that when the fence hadn't been finished, there was no perimeter sort of guarding the school. What they noticed was when the children came out of class to play at recess or have lunch, that the children played on the playground in small circles, small groups, close to the building, close to the school. They stayed together and they stayed pretty close to the building. And they saw this week over week over week. Then a fence was erected around the perimeter, right? So the border of the school was now protected. There was a boundary. And what they noticed almost immediately is when the children came out to play at recess, at lunch, they played the whole field. They took up space. They went all the way to the fence in some cases, but they took up space because they knew where safety was. They knew where the boundaries were. And that's the thing about boundaries that I think gets lost. We treat them like a wall, like something that keeps people out. But if you look at the research, at the people who study this for a living, it's almost the complete opposite. Brené Brown, who we all know and love for her work, many, many years, has spent decades interviewing people about connection and compassion. And she found that the most compassionate, the most emotional, empathetic people she talked to were the ones who were boundaried, not despite it, but because of it. Her line that's famous is clear is kind and unclear is unkind. And when you sit with that, it flips the whole story we tell ourselves. The narrative looks different. We think that saying no is the kind move, but it's actually the vague yes, the resentful sure, the yes we didn't mean that does the damage. And here's the real cost to skipping this. Adam Grant's research on givers found that the people who burn out the fastest at work aren't the takers, it's the generous people who never put limits around their generosity. They run out. They're depleted. And when you run out, you're no good to anyone else, including the people you're trying to help in the first place. So a boundary isn't you being less generous. It's what makes your generosity sustainable enough to last. The part I want people to walk away with, that all of you listening should remember, is that boundaries aren't rejection. They're information. When you say things like, I don't take calls after 6 p.m., or I don't take on new projects without a week's notice, you're not pushing someone away. You're telling them exactly how to be in a relationship with you. And that clarity is what actually builds respect. People don't respect us more when we're endlessly available. I had to do this recently with someone in my professional world who is very valuable to me, who enjoys catching up with work over the weekend. And the Slacks, the texts, the emails were coming in over the weekend with a sense of urgency. And I had to remind them that as a general rule, I do not work weekends. Now, that doesn't mean I may not think about things that I have going on or refine something, but it's my time. It's my choice if I want to work on a weekend. And that person actually saved up their messages until Monday. Or they would write me and say, I know you're not working. I just had to get this out of my head. So Monday, when you have a chance, can you get back to me on this? And it worked really well. Now, if there's an emergency, if something's on fire, yes, please call me. Please bother my weekend. But most things aren't on fire. Most things aren't emergencies. So we have to train people, and they respect us when we're consistent with our yes or our no, because our yes becomes our capability for saying no. And that's the trade. The boundary costs you a little in the short term. You're uncomfortable, but it buys you long term trust, theirs and honestly your own. What about moving from what will they think to what will I stand for? That's an important shift, because when you respond to a request, a conflict, or a moment that pulls you towards accommodation, you need to pause and ask yourself, does my response reflect what I actually stand for or what I think they want to hear? Your values are your navigation system. You know how much I talk about values. And when you lead from them, your yes or your no actually means something. It carries weight, it has substance. It doesn't feel arbitrary or like compliance or like weakness. It's important to separate being liked from being trusted. And this one's tricky. I often will ask a new client when I'm coaching around personal brand, around influence, around career growth. I will ask them, do you value more being liked or being trusted? And most of them, after a pause, will admit to being liked more. They care about wanting to be liked. And these are people in leadership positions where the nuance of the difference matters a lot. So ask yourself honestly, in those relationships that matter the most to your career, are you focused on being liked or on being trusted? Because the goal isn't for people to feel necessarily comfortable around you. The goal is for them to believe in you, to follow you, to advocate for you when you're not in the room. We respect people that we sometimes don't like, but we respect them and we can trust them because we know that consistency of values plus action equals credibility. We know that's there. We may not like them. We may not want to go, have an iced tea with them on the weekend, but we trust them. We know what we're going to get. The byproduct is trust, not likability. And remember that values formula that I talk about: values plus action, values plus action. It's not action with no values, and it's not values without putting action to it. Those two have to work together. You often hear me encourage listeners to say, what do you stand for? What is non negotiable to you? What is the hill you will die on, figuratively? Because that's the foundation of your personal brand. Your brand is known through consistent, repeated behavior. And every time you respond from your values instead of your need to be liked, you're actively building your brand. Today was a mouthful. This message is a lot to unpack. And I really encourage you to spend the time thinking about it. I'm not shaming you. I'm not trying to make you feel bad if you're a people pleaser. We've all been there. We've all wanted to be liked. We've wanted people to think positively of us and to see us as kind, right? That's not bad. Where it crosses into unhealthy and depreciating your influence is when your motivation doesn't align with the action, where you're resenting it, where you're cutting away your confidence. That's when it's unhealthy. And that's what you can stop today. That's the behavior you can fix right now. So this week, going forward, I want you to pay attention to every yes you give. Notice which ones come from conviction and which ones come from the need to avoid discomfort, right? I don't want anybody to be mad at me. I want to be liked, right? Notice the difference. And you don't have to change them all at once. People are going to wonder what happened if you're a chronic people pleaser. We don't want to send up flares that something is wrong, but just start noticing yourself, because awareness is always where the work begins. If this episode named something you needed named, or it struck a nerve that you needed to have touched, or has made you think about things a little bit differently, and you're going to spend time thinking about that, please follow this show so you don't miss what's coming next. We have some amazing programs coming, and everything that we've talked about so far has built to this. So follow the program. Send this message to someone who needs to hear this if you suspect that their yes is automatic when it should be deliberate. You can do it gently. You don't have to point it out directly, but you can do it gently and say, maybe you think about how you're showing up, because we value you more for your trust and credibility and part of the being part of the team and your contribution, than always being the one who will pick up what no one else wants to do. What a generous thing you can do by sharing this message with someone else. I appreciate you being with me. I appreciate your listening. I look forward to seeing you on the next podcast episode. And until we see each other again, I wish you health, happiness, and all good things.
Thanks for tuning in to the Lida Citroen podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the show and leave a review. It helps more people discover these inspiring conversations. For more tools, insights, and resources, visit Lida360.com or connect with Lida on LinkedIn. Until next time, remember, your influence has the power to make a real difference.